All right, hey everyone. We're going to start up our next lecture, 1 o'clock here, with someone very near and dear to many of us. This next lecture is by Neal Hurst, curator of textiles at the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. We are especially excited about this lecture here at the Frontier Culture Museum because it's all about something you're seeing many of us wear all over the place. So to get a little bit further down in the weeds, I'll hand it off to Neal in just a second, but before I do, I just want to thank the American Frontier Culture Foundation and Virginia Humanities for helping to partially sponsor the lecture series that we've had this weekend. But without further ado, Neal Hurst.
Thank you, Davis. Before I get started, just thank you to everybody here at the Frontier Culture Museum. Thank you to Paige, Sam, Davis for organizing such a lovely event. Beautiful weather. Also great to be back at the birthplace of the hunting shirt. Well, this project that I embarked on many years ago now really began in the mid-2000s when Colonial Williamsburg began a program called Revolutionary City. The trade shops were charged with interpreting the Revolutionary War. After building on research previously started by many others, we decided to make a series of garments for interpretation, which included this strange garment known as a hunting shirt, because many of them were made in Williamsburg during the war itself, the Revolutionary War. While sewing on a reproduction, a guest walked into the Margaret Hunter millinery shop named Duncan Trussell and told me that at the collection that he worked for, one of these fringed garments was in it. And I was slightly shocked, but followed up and found the one that you see here on the screen. The shirt was sold at Hendershot auctions and then disappeared. We had no clue where it went to until Duncan walked into the millinery in Williamsburg. I was given a chance to study the garment housed then at the National Civil War Museum in Harrisburg. Long story there. And with a pattern at hand, I was very interested in figuring out more about these really unusual garments. So in 2012, during my senior year at the College of William and Mary, again, many years ago, I had the chance to undertake and put to paper research that I had compiled for several years on what turns out to be an extremely interesting topic pertaining to the development of American fashion, and interesting to many folks who are just interested in clothing in early America. So this afternoon, I hope to provide you guys with just a little bit of history about the hunting shirt and its development and usage throughout the 18th century and the early 19th century, but primarily in a military context. But more often, shockingly about this garment, how quickly memory forgets about it. I'll also share with you the 4 known hunting shirts that survive today. Only 4 out of probably millions, I mean maybe even tens of millions that were made during the course of the 18th and 19th century. So what is this garment? Now you've seen plenty of people here today wearing them, but it can be defined as a shirt-like garment. It's split down the center front, caped around the neck, with fringe on all of its edges. Very, very strange, unique garment. Sometimes the shirts are also pleated in the forearm. So where do we begin? In the fall of 1775, Norfolk, the largest and most populated of Virginia's colonial cities, became the theater of operation for suppressing the American rebellion against English authority. Virginians rapidly mobilized thousands of men to form a professional army to defend American liberties. During the last week in August, the Norfolk Committee of Safety summoned a man named John Shaw, a merchant and commissary agent to Virginia, for examination of supposed Tory sympathies. Earlier in the week, Shaw informed British forces about a rebel fifer in an independent company named Alexander Maine and suggested they arrest him for his, quote, impetus in wearing a hunting shirt in their presence. The soldiers immediately arrested Maine and imprisoned him on board the sloop of war Otter for further investigation. At the completion of their examination, Norfolk's Committee of Safety ruled Shaw an enemy to American liberty and warned every friend to his country to have no further dealings or connections with him. John Shaw easily identified the rebel through the choice of his clothing. Shaw labeled Alexander Mann as a rebel not from his personal knowledge but his choice of wearing a politically charged garment known as the hunting shirt. Prior to the American Revolution, hunting shirts remained limited only to the counties west of the Blue Ridge Mountains, an area known in British North America simply as the backcountry. However, when the royal authority threatened American liberties, rebels in Virginia and Pennsylvania quickly adopted and wore these shirts to show their outward defiance against the British crown. Like the tricolour cockade or the Phrygian cap worn during the French Revolution, the hunting shirt became the emblem of the American War for Independence. Stretching from Pennsylvania through North Carolina, the Blue Ridge Mountains created a geological border isolating what British North Americans called, as I said before, the backcountry, the frontier. This region, separated from the populated eastern counties, fostered a unique blend of cultures and economy, and what a great place to study that, but here at the Frontier Culture Museum. A mix of English, Scotch-Irish, Germanic, African, and even native inhabitants called this expansive territory home. While many farmed the land, others took advantage of large mercantile businesses that employed hunters to harvest red deerskins, or summer deerskins, which supplied the enormous demand around the world for leather breeches. Hunters who supplied the deerskins developed a cheap and uniquely American garment during the mid-18th century known as the hunting shirt. The raw material for buckskin breeches primarily came from England's North American colonies. Large mercantile businesses conducted trade in the backcountry here with Native Americans who sought manufactured and imported goods in exchange for the raw deerskins and furs they trapped and killed, while other companies hired professional hunters just to hunt for skins of deer. Once collected, merchants typically moved the skins to South Carolina, where they were commonly sold for higher prices compared to other colonies. Merchants then repacked the skins into hogsheads and shipped them to England during the 1750s. Savannah on the coast of Georgia emerged as the leading city to export deerskins, averaging through the American Revolution over 200,000 pounds of skins, not individual skins, but pounds of skins a year. Hired hunters needed a cheap and light summer garment to wear while hunting, and this led to the development of this garment. Many descriptions of a hunting shirt compare the garment to a smock, a garment constructed like a shirt with sturdy linens that extended to the knees and worn to protect the wearer's clothing from abrasion. English, German, and Scotch-Irish cultures maintained a long tradition of wearing protective overgarments, particularly by farmers and wagoners. Visually, the hunting shirt retained many attributes of a smock, and you can see one here, the enraged farmer here on the screen wearing one, with its often long length. And writers oftentimes qualified their descriptions with curious statements saying that hunting shirts only somewhat resemble a smock. Although both garments resemble one another, other obvious features of a hunting shirt, such as the split down the front, the cape, the fringe placed, and the fringe place this newly developed garment sort of into a class of its own. Hunting shirts borrowed features such as the cape from other utilitarian garments within the English, German, and Scotch-Irish cultures, things like greatcoats, sort of protective overgarments that folks were wearing at the time. Now, during the early years of the hunting shirt, the garment remained highly regional, as I said before, blocked by the Blue Ridge Mountain. Recorded in a will book in Augusta County at the death of one man named John Smith, establishes the first written reference of the term hunting shirt in the 18th century. At the death of Smith in 1759, without a will or other heirs, the county clerk recorded in the inventory all of Smith's possessions in order to pay his debts. The small inventory received an appraisal of only 20 pounds, with his horse as the single most expensive object, thing he owned. Clothing constituted the majority of the recorded items, and these garments included a jacket, a coat, leather breeches, leggings, a shirt, and most importantly, a hunting shirt. This will also listed a credit of 31 shillings owed to the estate by Captain William Preston. Now, Augusta County's clerk, say that 5 times fast, recorded Smith's inventory in the county will book, on May 20th, 1760, and promptly a day later, William Preston paid Smith's estate in full, recording in his receipt book that he received of William Preston 31 shillings in full of John Smith's pay as a soldier in his company and in full of all of his accounts. Smith soldiered in Augusta County under Preston during the year 1759, making it also the first military usage of the hunting shirt in the 18th century. Unfortunately, with not the most unique of names, John Smith, he appears in several other official military documents, both in the county militia and ranging company, so it's a little hard to place him outside of just Preston's company. So from this point forward, an 8-year void exists in documentation relating to early hunting shirts. The executors of John Smith estate lived in Augusta County and certainly knew the parlances for the garment that they listed. The hunting shirt differed from the 4 other shirts that were listed and worth a shilling more. Unfortunately, why those men chose to record the garment in that manner may be lost to history. The term hunting shirt would next appear not in a private context, such as in a will book, but more publicly in a newspaper in 1768. Sometime in the early summer of 1768, 2 convict servant men sent to Virginia as punishment for stealing in London decided to break their indenture and run away from their masters, Robert Whiteley and John Maxwell, at the forks of the James River in, right here, Augusta County. Their owners paid for an advertisement in William Rhines's newspaper, the Virginia Gazette, and it appeared in print on June 23, 1768. Like most runaway advertisements, the authors provided excellent descriptions of the 2 men, specifically their clothing, in order to identify them. One servant, Israel Cowan, was 27 years old. He was listed about 5 feet 7 inches high, of a dark complexion, his head bald, and blind in his left eye. He had on, when he went away, a new felt hat, an old thick-set coat with tortoiseshell buttons, a blue broadcloth jacket, trousers, and an old pair of shoes. The other man, named George Wilkinson, stood 5 feet 6 inches high, of a sandy complexion and red hair, and he had on, when he went away, a new felt hat, a hunting shirt, and a calico waistcoat, with old buckskin breeches, blue leggings, and old shoes. The owners of these men offered £5 reward, and if but one of them, 50 shillings, besides what the law allows. Now, the description given of George Wilkinson established the first printed reference to a hunting shirt in North America. William Rhines's newspaper, the Virginia Gazette, published in Virginia's capital of Williamsburg, maintained a large circulation, not only in Virginia but throughout the eastern seaboard. The authors paying for the advertisement certainly took into consideration the broad circulation, but continued to employ regional terminology only known to these areas in the backcountry, so we think. In 1770 and 1771, the Virginia Gazette published 2 other runaways from Augusta County wearing hunting shirts, while at the same time the Pennsylvania Gazette published its first hunting shirt reference. All 4 of the Pennsylvania advertisements centered around Lancaster County, of course, a major stopping point for those traveling along the Great Wagon Road that connected Philadelphia with Virginia's backcountry counties and the Shenandoah Valley. Now, the year 1775 marked the beginning of hostilities of the American Revolution. A month before the outbreak of the war, leaders of the colony of Virginia met at St. John's Church in Richmond to convene the Second Virginia Convention. On May 23rd, Patrick Henry from Hanover County gave his fiery liberty or death speech and exclaimed, quote, 3 millions of people armed in the holy cause of liberty and in such a country as that we possess are invincible by any force which our enemy can send against us. That afternoon, the convention passed a resolution to place the colony into a posture of defense. In order to defend the colony, Virginians needed to develop a plan of arming and clothing their militia at the time. Delegates to the Virginia Convention formed a committee of 12 consisting of Patrick Henry, Richard Henry Lee, Robert Carter Nicholas, Benjamin Harrison, Lemuel Reddick, George Washington, Adam Stephen, Andrew Lewis, who some of you may have met yesterday, William Christian, Edmund Pendleton, Thomas Jefferson, and Isaac Zane to address this looming issue. The men came from varied backgrounds, but almost half of them served as provincial officers in the French and Indian War, and also here in Dunmore's War. Lieutenant Colonel George Washington assumed command of the Virginia Regiment between 1754 and his resignation in 1758. Adam Stevens served under Washington as lieutenant and took command of the Virginia Regiment after Washington's resignation. Andrew Lewis initially commanded a company within the regiment, but soon after earned the rank of major and later commanded here in Dunmore's War. William Christian became an experienced, quote, Indian fighter in the backcountry after the French and Indian War and also fought during Dunmore's War. And these 5 men witnessed the usage of hunting shirts here in the backcountry, which influenced the discussion and the decisions made by this defense committee. 2 days after the convention decided to move the colony into a state of military readiness, the Defense Committee reported its suggestions, and they stated, quote, that every man to be provided with a good rifle or common firelock, and to be clothed in a hunting shirt by way of uniform. A full month before the outbreak of war, Virginians adopted the hunting shirt as the uniform for their infantry, establishing a symbolic garment not only for American liberty, but a garment worn in outward defiance against the crown. As Virginians slowly separated from royal governance without major armed conflict, New Englanders faced a grave situation. In the days that followed the clashes of Lexington and Concord, New Englanders rushed to Boston with a call to war and started to lay siege to that city. Military stores, equipment, tools, food, clothing, everything that you could think of for the art of war needed transportation to Boston to logistically support this newly formed army. During the second week in May, the Massachusetts Committee of Safety ordered defenses built around the city, including Charlestown and Bunkers Hill and Breed's Hill. The Continental Congress also needed to act quickly to organize an army to support the troops that were already in action around Boston. Within days, Virginians heard news of Lexington and Concord from their northern brothers in arms. Fallow fields across the countryside of Virginia turned into parade grounds where thousands of men wearing hunting shirts transformed into a fighting force. Philip Vickers Fithian, a tutor for Robert Carter of Nominee Hall, noted in his diary on June 6, 1775 in Stevensburg, Virginia, that, quote, Mars, the great god of battle, is now honored in every part of this spacious colony. But here every presence is warlike, every sound is martial, drums beating, fifes and bagpipes playing, and only sonorous and heroic tunes. Every man has a hunting shirt, which is the uniform for each company. Almost all have a cockade and buck's tail in their hat to represent that they are hardy, resolute, and invincible natives of the woods of America. Minute battalions or quick responding troops formed as well. The Culpeper Minute Battalion, including men from Culpeper County, Fauquier, and Orange counties. This battalion adopted, quote, strong brown linen hunting shirts with the words liberty or death worked in large white letters on the breast. Other companies also embraced Patrick Henry's slogan. As a writer from Middlesex County noted, quote, the sound of war echoes from north to south. Every plain is full of armed men who all wear a hunting shirt on the left breast, which is sewed in very legible letters, liberty or death. Michael Wallace of Falmouth reported the massing of troops in Fredericksburg again in May and claimed, quote, occasion of upwards 1,000 men to assemble together at Fredericksburg, among which is 600 good riflemen. If we had continued there 1 or 2 days longer, we should have had upwards of 10,000 men, as all the frontier counties of Virginia were in motion, and that Fredericksburg never was honored with so many brave, hardy men since it was a town, every man, rich and poor, with their hunting shirts, belts, tomahawks fixed in the best manner. These trained companies quickly moved into the city of Williamsburg, where they guarded critical infrastructure. The presence of an armed rebel force in the capital city placed Lord Dunmore sort of in a not a great place, in a state of trepidation perhaps. Rebel guards wearing hunting shirts watched over the Capitol, the Powder Magazine, and Peyton Randolph's house, and the Treasury. After Randolph's heroic return from the Continental Congress in Philadelphia, which included an escort into town under the guard of the Williamsburg Independent Company, Dunmore wrote of the appearance of the citizens in Williamsburg and claimed, quote, "This spirit received additional vigor from the appearance of members of the burgesses in the habits of this new institutionalized American fashion, in wearing a shirt of coarse linen or canvas over their clothes and a tomahawk by their sides." Lord Dunmore, uncertain of his future in Virginia, sent his wife and children aboard the HMS Fowey, a 24-gun warship lying in the York River, for safety. The loyalist James Parker, living in Norfolk, also commented on the governor's actions and stated, "I do not think his lady will return to Williamsburg. 'Tis said Lord Dunmore will provide the shirtmen will be sent away. These shirtmen, or Virginia uniform, are dressed with Osnaburg shirts over their clothes, a belt around them, and a tomahawk, or scalping knife. They look like a band of assassins, and it's my opinion if they fight at all, it will be in that way." Realizing the dire situation, the Continental Congress on June 14, 1775, authorized the raising of 6 companies of expert riflemen, 2 companies each from Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia. The Congress sent letters of encouragement to their delegates in those states and asked, if possible, get experienced officers and the very best men that can be procured, and the companies, as soon as formed, will march forward to Boston without expedition. Frederick County, Virginia, elected Daniel Morgan, seen here on the screen, to command their rifle company, while Berkeley County elected Hugh Stevenson. With military experience from the French and Indian War and later Indian Wars, both Morgan and Stevenson understood the usefulness of the rifle against the enemy. Recruitment started in late June, with each company completely filled in only a matter of days. Once the men departed, the hunting shirt began its journey for the first time towards New England. Beginning in July, riflemen, including Morgan's men, passed through Philadelphia, where many of the delegates of the Continental Congress witnessed the hunting shirt for the very first time. Silas Deane, a delegate from Connecticut, wrote this to his wife on July 1st after he saw a column of riflemen bound for Boston and wished that, quote, "our New England troops would imitate their uniform, as it is cheap and light." Deane wrote his wife again in July, and he explained, "I send on what is called a shirt uniform or rifle dress as a sample pattern and wish that it may be adopted." Boy, do we wish that that survives. As regiments arrived to support the siege of Boston, some wore fine woolen coats, others short practical jackets, and others went without any uniforms at all. Washington quickly understood the growing social dissension amongst the ranks due to the differences in needs and wants of clothing. Washington called for a number of hunting shirts, not less than 10,000, in order to clothe the army, and that the garment would have a happier tendency to unite the men and abolish those provincial distinctions which led to jealousy and dissatisfaction. Simeon Alexander remembered when Morgan's men arrived when he applied for his pension in 1832 and recounted, quote, "Morgan came with his regiment of riflemen to Boston either with Washington or soon after his arrival. The uniform of Morgan's regiment was a short frock made of pepper and salt colored cotton cloth, like a common working frock worn by our people, except that it was short and opened before and tied with strings." Until August 1775, the majority of New Englanders did not know of the backcountry hunting shirt from Virginia. Congress informed Washington that a quantity of tow cloth for making hunting shirts may be obtained in Rhode Island and Connecticut. After Washington sent agents to purchase the cheap linens, he wrote to Nicholas Cook, the governor of Rhode Island, and explained the dire situation of the army. Washington informed Cook that the Congress gave him permission to obtain the tow cloth from his state for the purpose of making Indian shirts or hunting shirts for the men. Realizing that Cook had no clue what he was talking about, Washington sent him a pattern and stated, "As soon as any number is made worth the conveyance, you will please direct them to be forwarded. It is designed as a species of uniform, both cheap and convenient." Clothing a new army remained a major task throughout the Revolution, but the autumn of 1775 marked the first offensive action for the Continental Army. In September 1775, a two-pronged offensive movement started against the British-held provinces of Canada. Brigadier General Richard Montgomery led one column up Lake Champlain, successfully capturing the city of Montreal on November 13th, while General Benedict Arnold cut through the wilderness of Maine on a direct path to Quebec. American media quickly found out about this invasion, and the Pennsylvania Magazine published one of the first maps of the Lake Champlain area. The map provided details of geography, fortifications, and other areas of settlement, but most importantly, it included a cartouche, which was the first printed image of a hunting shirt. That's the one you can see on the screen here now. The map's cartouche provided readers with a visual representation of the troops fighting on the sides of the American army. In the center, a panoply of arms and laurels framed the map's title. To the left of the image stands one of the American native allies, dressed in leggings and a breechclout while grasping a symbolic peace pipe in one hand. And to the right stands an American rifleman dressed in a long hunting shirt with a small, narrow cape and fringes on all of its edges. Knowledge of the hunting shirt began to spread rapidly once soldiers started to wear the garment around Boston. A young Aaron Burr marched to Quebec under Benedict Arnold, wrote this to his sister to describe his appearance and claimed, quote, "I must give you a sketch, but let me promise that I am about the color of an Otter Indian." He continued, to begin at the foot, over a pair of boots, I draw a pair of woolen trousers of coarse coating, a short double-breasted jacket of the same. Over this comes a present from a southern gentleman, a short shirt after the rifle fashion, curiously fringed, with a belt just as curious. Burr referenced the hunting shirt and not only its unusual attributes, but also the fact that it came from the South. Burr, a native of New Jersey, never knew of the garment before entering service in the Continental Army. Now, while Washington commanded a fledgling army in the field, great thinkers of the Continental Congress decided to ponder antiquity. For some, hunting shirts brought to mind images of ancient Rome, comparing this garment to Roman soldiers' dress. In a letter to Abigail Adams, John Adams wrote of a golden medal to be struck to celebrate the American victory at Boston. When Pierre Eugene du Cimetière shared his drawing of the medal that included a rendering of the first seal of the United States with Adams, he commented, on one side, Liberty with her Peleus, on the other a rifler in his uniform, with his rifle gun in one hand and his tomahawk in the other. This dress and these troops, with this kind of armor being peculiar to America, unless the dress was known to the Romans. Adams exclaimed to his wife that Dr. Franklin shared with him a book that contained images of Roman soldiers, one of which appeared exactly like the uniform of the American hunting shirt. The loose flowing capes and fringes harken back perhaps to the draperies worn in Rome? Not quite sure. While the Roman soldiers created a perfect imagery for American thinkers, Europeans also wanted to see for themselves this very unusual uniform. A German engraver named Johann Martin Will from Augsburg printed two images of American soldiers, possibly as early as 1776, but I have other thoughts on that now. Could be post-war. Both images portray soldiers as hardy men with beards, heavily stocked muskets with extremely long bayonets. Each man wears a pointed cap with a red plume, marked with, in very large letters, Congress. Attired in hunting shirts, each figure shows multiple capes, rows of fringes. Although Will claimed this as an exact drawing of an American soldier, it seems slightly overly embellished compared to the reality that George Washington faced. The English and Europeans continued their interest in hunting shirts through the rest of the war. As early as February 1776, an American rifleman began to attend London masquerade balls regularly with his companion of an American Indian. Excuse me. Soon after the end of the American Revolution, state and local governments began to establish uniform militia companies, with the majority mustered in New England. In this period, a change of etymology also began to take place, replacing the term of hunting shirt with hunting frock. With fabric in abundance and wartime conservatism over, hunting shirts grew in length and appearance, and they began to appear more like a coat. In 1787, the New Hampshire militia turned out in review for Commander-in-Chief Major General Silly. After watching the parade, he thanked the regiments and companies and individuals who have uniformed themselves with rifle frocks and overalls trimmed with binding or fringe of the same colors of the facings of that brigade. Silly also proposed that all regiments in New Hampshire should adopt the hunting shirt as their mode of dress due to the cheapness and changes in serviceability. Employing domestic-made linens allowed also for an economic boost and further independence from foreign powers. He claimed that, quote, it made an appearance so far superior to those whom were not in uniform. New York issued a similar general order thanking the Company of Brigade of Artillery, the Battalion of Grenadiers and Light Infantry, and the battalion formed of companies in rifle dress, or frock companies, for their soldierly appearance, the uniform of their appointments, and the good conduct in their review and evolutions. While militia companies drilled in town squares, international conflicts sat on the horizon for the new American Republic. With the formation of the new French Republic in 1792, England, along with many other European countries, declared war on France. The wars in Europe restricted trade to and from the United States, and Britain began capturing American merchant vessels, seizing their cargo, and impressing their sailors. If the United States went to war, it needed a facility for manufacturing and storing supplies like any other nation. The United States established the Office of Public Purveyor in 1795. This office acquired the needed materials, arms, clothing, and naval stores for the Army and the Navy during times of both peace and war. 4 years later, in 1799, the American Congress purchased a parcel of property that bordered the Schuylkill River to the east and the Gray's Ferry Road to the west. In Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, for about $2,000 to establish what was then known as the United States Arsenal, sometimes later known in the Civil War as the Schuylkill Arsenal. In 1800, construction began of the arsenal, and 2 years into the project, contractors reported to Congress the cost of construction to date totaled $152,000, and that it would take another 4 years to finish the complex. Sounds typical, I guess. Once completed in 1805, the 4 brick buildings, each 3 stories in height, were used chiefly as storage and formed a hollow square. The facility maintained and manufactured all the textile necessities for the soldier. As tensions grew between the United States and Great Britain, the American public understood the situation and sought the security of the garment that helped them to gain their independence once again. The people of Williamsburg, Virginia, toasted on July 4th, 1807, that domestic manufacturers and the hunting shirt offered the best correctives to British insolence. In response to the British attack on the American frigate Chesapeake on June 22nd, 1807, President Thomas Jefferson authorized the establishment of the United States Rifle Regiments. Once again, these regiments adopted the hunting shirt, but this time it was a garment made of durable linen duck called Russia sheeting, dyed green with yellow applied fringe, slightly John Deere-ish. Immediately, the Office of Public Purveyor went into action and established contracts for materials, buttons, and fringe for the men's clothing. With war declared against Great Britain on June 18, 1812, the Public Purveyor maintained open contracts for 50,000 yards of Russia sheeting and over 91,000 yards of fringe alone. A surviving tailor's blotter from the United States Arsenal listed materials withdrawn for the construction of hunting shirts, or rifle frocks as they were known. In 1812, Ezekiel Howe, a Philadelphia tailor, produced 900 rifle frocks in March and 900 more in May. Howe withdrew 5,400 yards of green sheeting and 9,400 yards of yellow fringe for these garments alone. Another tailor under contract through the Arsenal, Jonathan Carson, withdrew 6,000 yards of green sheeting and 18,000 yards of yellow fringe for making 2,000 rifle frocks that same year. After the War of 1812, the hunting shirt quickly saw its demise as a viable uniform for the American Army. A garment made chiefly from linen does not withstand heavy military service. From 1850 onward, the United States Army clothed its troops, including riflemen, in durable woolens. All right, so let's take a look at the 4 known surviving hunting shirts. I'll just give you a little bit of background on each one. So to date, out of the thousands that were being made, We only have 4. So the first one up, and probably the most famous, is the one that was worn by Captain Abraham Duryea in 1776. The Duryea hunting shirt endures a very long history and remains the only documented hunting shirt from the American Revolution. Captain Abraham Duryea of the Dutchess County Militia, New York, purportedly wore this shirt during the Battle of Long Island in New York in 1776. The shirt resurfaced for the first time after the Revolution in 1855 in the Poughkeepsie Tomlinson Museum in Poughkeepsie, New York. Over the next decade, Enoch Carter, the curator of Washington's headquarters museum in Newburgh, New York, purchased and acquired from the Poughkeepsie Tomlinson Museum a large collection of revolutionary curiosities, as he described them, including the Duryea hunting shirt. For much of the 20th century, the shirt remained on view in case number 1 with the small museum. But resurgence in patriotism and interest of the colonial period on the eve of the American bicentennial placed the spotlight upon this aging garment once again in 1976. Today, the shirt remains in the collection of Washington's headquarters in fair condition. However, at some point within the shirt's history, prior to 1855, the left sleeve was torn off. We don't really know why, but it does not have a left sleeve. The one you see on there is sort of a conservator's mock-up. The right sleeve remains intact from the 18th century. This shirt is way over the top compared to all of the other shirts that we're going to see here. But after studying this shirt, one of the things that was very interesting immediately was the pattern. So if we're trying to argue whether this shirt was supposed to be split down the front or not, or if it was supposed to be a smock-like garment, the way the garment was made is it folded into itself to make the center front. So it never had any side seams at all. So it was always intended to have that split down the front. So it's kind of an interesting point to take when I began looking at these for their patterns. The next shirt, which I call the Harrisburg shirt, is the one that Duncan Trussell told me about when he came into the millinery shop 15 years ago. In December 2001, Gary Hendershot Auctions published a catalog entitled The Patriots, a price list of American history 1776 to 1945. Lot 63 pictured a hunting shirt and trousers made of white linen. Hendershot claimed that a man named Jack Pinard purchased the garments from a small New Hampshire museum with the story that they were worn in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania during the winter of 1777, but offered no other sources to support that claim. Whether or not the Continental soldier wore this garment at Valley Forge, the object survives in remarkable condition. The great news about this is this will be going on view at the National Army Museum for their 250th anniversary next year. So please go check that out. This is a very, very, very important shirt. It's also the first shirt that we found documented with woven fringe on it. So the fringe is woven like a bed lace that was applied to the edges, which sparked a whole nother sort of interest rabbit hole for myself. All right, the next shirt. The shirt that's now at the Museum of the American Revolution. In 2010, a hunting shirt found in a barn in Haverhill, New Hampshire, resurfaced as the newest extant example, sold on eBay as a Victorian women's nightgown. Sadly, it at the time was held in a private collection before sold to the Museum of the American Revolution, and no other information survives about the garment. But its existence now makes 2 hunting shirts with provenance to New Hampshire, no southern hunting shirts at all, by the way, and a second hunting shirt with woven fringe on it as well. And finally, and one's probably that is more close to the things that we may find out here in the backcountry in Augusta County, is the Michael Crow hunting shirt. In the collection of the Greene County Historical Society, Greene County, Pennsylvania, the Michael Crow hunting shirt provides a true example of backcountry craftsmanship. Constructed from domestically manufactured red and natural colored linsey woolsey, Nancy Crow apparently completed this garment for her husband to wear on their wedding day in 1799. This one is very different. It's a transition. It shows a unique A-line shape compared to the other examples, which were more cut on geometry. They're cut out of squares and rectangles. This is now showing the sort of new style of hunting shirt as we move into the 19th century. All right, so to finish up. Oops, sorry. As the decades passed, the memory of the once prolific symbol of American independence faded from memory. Several instances brought the garment back into the public eye, such as the one on April 13th, 1826. The Boston Commercial Gazette reported that Senator John Randolph of Roanoke, a cousin to Thomas Jefferson, arrived at the United States Senate chamber with a red flannel hunting shirt over his arm. The paper stated that he made a motion to adjourn, and on the account of it being Good Friday, and while the other senators considered the motion, he put on his hunting shirt and wore it throughout the chamber. The editor further explained that his attachment to this garment proceeds, I suppose, from the fact that his father raised a hunting shirt company at the commencement of the Revolutionary War. The eccentric Randolph, who loved the ideals of the Revolution and was an ardent supporter of the Anti-Federalists, used the symbol to show his rebelliousness against his fellow senators. As veterans of the Revolution passed away, memorials of artwork were commissioned to preserve the people and momentous events of that era. During the 50th year of American independence, Jonathan Trumbull, a Connecticut artist who witnessed the Revolution, installed his final two pieces of art, memorializing the signing of the Declaration of Independence and the surrender of General Burgoyne at Saratoga within the Capitol Rotunda in Washington, D.C., still there today. In 1836, the National Portrait Gallery opened its first exhibit. The galleries displayed portraits of important Americans since the Revolution, including Daniel Morgan, dressed in a hunting shirt. The curators, like myself, I guess, feared that visitors would not understand the garment and called upon Trumbull, who provided a description printed in their exhibit catalog. In the interest of preserving the American relic, Trumbull wrote, quote, "You express apprehension that the rifle dress of General Morgan may be mistaken hereafter for a wagoner's frock, which he, perhaps, wore on the expedition with Braddock. There is no more resemblance between the two dresses than between a cloak and a coat. The wagoner's frock was intended, as presents cartmen's, to cover and protect their own clothes. It is merely long, coarse shirt reaching to below the knee. The dress of the Virginia riflemen who came to Cambridge in 1775, among whom was Morgan, was an elegant loose dress reaching to the middle of the thigh, ornamented with fringes in various parts, and meeting the pantaloons of the same material and color, fringed in a corresponding style. It cost a trifle. A soldier could wash it in any brook that he passed, and however worn and ragged and dirty his clothing might be, when it was thrown over it, it was an elegant uniform." Trumbull hoped to dispel any misinterpretations of the garment and to inform the younger generations of the importance of this distinctive American uniform. In spite of his efforts, the knowledge and the image of the hunting shirt would soon vanish from American memory. In October 1857, George Washington Parke Custis, the adopted grandson of former President George Washington, passed away. Posthumously published, Custis compiled a book at the end of his life that detailed Washington both publicly and privately. The book's editors collected essays published by Custis and included an entire chapter dedicated to the hunting shirt. In Chapter 8, Custis exclaimed, "The hunting shirt, the emblem of the Revolution, is banished from national military, but still lingers among the hunters and pioneers of the far West." Like Trumbull and the needed description of Morgan wearing the hunting shirt, Custis provided a detailed history of the adoption of the garment through the disappearance from America. In the final paragraph of the chapter referring to hunting shirts, he wrote, quote, "And should not Americans feel proud of the garb and hail it as national, in which their fathers endured such toil and privation, in the mighty struggle for independence? The hunting shirt, the venerable emblem of the Revolution, will have disappeared from among Americans, only to be found in museums like ancient armor, exposed to the gaze of the curious." Thank you all very much.